Okay, this will be our final segment on this topic. And in this one, we are going to be discussing hate and sexual orientation. So let's review our Freudian defense mechanisms that I alluded to in an earlier lecture on this same chapter. Freud says that our ego has access to a lot of different mechanisms for defending ourself from the truth about ourselves. So we are using these defense mechanisms to protect our ego from the truth. Our ego uses it to protect itself from knowing the truth about ourselves. So one defense mechanism that we can use for any purpose is a reaction formation. A reaction formation is when we don't like our initial reaction. It makes us embarrassed or it makes us feel bad. And so we really quickly formulate a new reaction and pretend like that was always the reaction that we had. Sometimes you'll see that in a person you'll see like that little micro expression of anger across their face, and then they cover it up with a smile. They're like, oh no, I'm happy that happened. You know what? I'm actually glad that happened. That's a reaction formation. So in the case of a person who displays hatred towards people who are gay or lesbian, they may be creating a new reaction to cover up what their natural reaction is. Maybe their natural reaction is that they feel similarly. Maybe they're attracted to their own sex, but that makes them uncomfortable. They can't really cope with it. And so they switch it around to be, no, actually, I hate people who are attracted to their own sex. And so I can pretend like that was always my reaction. I never felt like I was attracted to people of my own sex. I hate people who are like that. Projection is another defense mechanism where we are holding an attitude or a belief that makes us uncomfortable. And so instead of acknowledging that this is what we think, we pretend like other people think it, and then we can defend ourselves against them. So, for example, I might be attracted to people of my same sex, and that I don't like that about myself. So instead, I project that feeling onto other people, and I say, is that person coming onto me? Don't they know I don't like people of my same sex? Why would they be flirting with me? I don't like that. Now I can be mad at them because I'm going to pretend like all of this emanated from them when in fact I was the one who was attracted to them in the first place. So I'm going to project my feelings onto somebody else so that then I can defend myself against I'm pretending like they're actually the ones doing. So a person who's really vehement that everybody's always coming on to them whenever they go, to the gay bar or whatever, they're like, man, I can't go in there. Everybody always comes onto me. And it's like, maybe it's that you feel like coming on to all of them, right? You're projecting your feelings onto them. So my indentations don't make sense because what I meant to imply is that these kinds of Freudian defense mechanisms can be the underpinning of homophobia. If you are busy trying to defend your own ego from the reality that maybe you have mixed feelings, maybe you're a 2 on the Kinsey scale. You're mostly heterosexual with maybe some components of interest in people of your same sex, and that makes you feel really super uncomfortable. You might overcompensate by behaving in, aggressive ways, disparaging ways, or things like that towards people who are comfortable in their sexual orientations. It might cause you to engage in gay bashing, where you put people down based on their sexual orientation, right? Where, you're being disparaging because it's really about your own insecurity. That's the idea in this model that, what looks like hate towards a group might be really about self-loathing, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen this very small church that apparently only consists of an extended family, is what I have heard. But they'll go to funerals and hold up these horrible signs just to be just so antagonistic. What's the point? I'm going to say something that they would hate to hear. What are you guys trying to cover up? Like, what can't you accept about yourselves? Right? And that's what this Freudian defense mechanism argument does. It says these people look like they're trying to overcompensate, which is another defense mechanism. Freud says that if you are feeling insecure about something, you'll overdo, like really try and overcompensate for that and make it seem like, oh no, look, I really, really love this person, or I really, really hate this person, or I really, really, like, you overdo it. Overcompensation is a Freudian defense mechanism also. Oh, Freud has like 39 of them, so I could keep going. But anyway. So back to my penchant for maps. I do love to show you guys maps. So here are hate crime laws by state. And again, if it's gray, it means that they don't actually have any specific laws. In fact, a lot of these states that are gray don't just lack hate crime laws for LGBT people. They probably in general just generally don't have hate crime laws. A lot of these states just don't have hate crime laws. So the darkest green have hate crime laws that protect gay, lesbian, and transgender people. The lighter green protects gay and lesbian people, but have not added on transgender people. It's possible that some of these states have changed their laws since this map was made, but I can't find a new map. And I do love a good map that's been colored for me. So, but what you see is just like we've seen with the other maps I've shown you in this chapter, is that, different states have different laws and different protections in place. Now, just because a state doesn't have a specific hate crime law that specifically declares it a hate crime on a particular group doesn't mean that they don't take that crime seriously in general. It just means that you don't get added penalties for you behaving in a criminal way towards a particular protected class. So it's more than likely that they still will prosecute the crime for what the crime was without tacking on this additional part that's called hate. Now, in 2015, on the left-hand side, we can see a breakdown by category of, how people who were victims of hate crime were targeted. And you can see that in 2015, the most common explanation for why they were targeted was race, ethnicity, or ancestry. Then it was religion. And then the next most common was sexual orientation. So now it's important to keep in mind that if you're looking at race, ethnicity, ancestry bias, you're looking at a larger percentage of the population that could potentially be targets of that, right? That everybody is some race. Everybody does vary on ethnicity, and people could have biases against that. Same thing with religion. People could attack different religions, and but with sexual orientation, you're looking at a much smaller percentage of the population, and they're representing a large percentage of the hate crimes. And so while it's a smaller proportion than race or religion, it is an inordinate amount, I think is what we could basically argue. And so this chart on the right is sort of giving you a different angle on the same thing, just showing you across time how things have changed. And, if you compare from 1991 to 2006, which was my newest data on this chart, you're seeing like a doubling of the percentage of hate crimes that were based on sexual orientation. And then by the time we get to 2015, the percentage is 17.7. So it's climbed yet again. So hate crime incidents are going up over time. They kind of got high there in the middle of the 90s up to 00. And they kind of went down there in 2006, and then they've come back up and exceeded the previous numbers. So hate crimes are not going away. They seem to be increasing. Now, I thought I'd share this with you guys because it's kind of a little bit surprising, I think, when you see that Seattle is among the worst big cities for anti-LGBT hate crimes. And this is from 2012. So this isn't something exactly current, but it is showing us that Seattle was number 3 in the nation for rate of anti-LGBT hate crime incidents per 100,000 of population. So they corrected for variations in population size, and Seattle came out number 3. Washington, D.C. came out number 1, and I got to tell you what, Washington, D.C. is number 1 on a lot of things that they should not want to be number 1 on, and this is one of them. They're the highest rate of HIV infections. There's all sorts of things that you're going to notice on maps that I show you that they're number 1 on bad things. But, you look at some of the other locations and you think, why would Seattle be among these other locations that maybe our stereotypes would tell us, okay, yeah, maybe I could accept that there's a lot of hate crimes in those locations, but why is it so high in Seattle? One interpretation is that that people in Seattle might feel more comfortable reporting when they have been the victim of a hate crime. I mean, we have hate crime laws in our state and others don't necessarily have it. So it's possible that they feel more comfortable and they're actually reporting more. That's possible. It's also possible that in Seattle, there's a pretty narrow neighborhood where there's a high density of people who are LGBT who all live in that one neighborhood, and it might just make it easy to target. It's really hard to say exactly why a city that has very progressive population would be so high on this hate crime list. It's I'm very perplexed by it. I'm not exactly sure why it exists like that. Trying to come up with decent explanations, but it's really hard to say. Well, that should conclude our discussion of what we know about the biology and potentially any kind of socialization, and then the process of identifying our sexual orientations. And so I will see you guys in the next chapter.